Welcome again. We're going to have Senator Denise Grimsley join us here on the TaxWatch stage. She is running for Commissioner of Agriculture. She is currently a member of the Florida Senate, representing District 26, and serves as the chairman of the Senate Agricultural Committee. She also serves as a hospital administrator in her private life, focusing on patient care, customer satisfaction, and fiscal responsibility. And she still works her family's citrus and cattle operations. She received her degree from Polk Community College and Warner Southern College and earned an MBA from the University of Miami. She is a proud mother and grandmother. So welcome, Denise. Tell us why you want to be the Commissioner of Agriculture.
Thanks, George, and thank you for having me today. You know, I think for the Commissioner of Agriculture, for those of us in the industry, my family and I are in the citrus business, been in the citrus business for 3 generations, or 5 generations in Florida. For us, the Commissioner of Agriculture is actually more important than the governor. The Commissioner of Agriculture is the one that oversees anything related to agriculture, and as far as the industry specifically, pest and diseases, water, those types of things are extremely important to us, and the Commissioner has a voice in all of those issues.
Big issues in agriculture in Florida. Citrus has really taken it on the chin in the last decades, right, with canker, then greening, and then our hurricane this last year. Tell us what you will do to fight for citrus and to help restore that important part of our economy.
And so citrus it's been a difficult time, I would say probably in the last 10 years for us. And we've dealt with greening. My family specifically, I mean, we have 350 acres of citrus. We're down from 450. We pushed 100 acres to get back into the cattle in order to diversify our income somewhat. But I'll also say about citrus growers and agriculture producers in general is that we are resilient. We will find a way to do more with less. We have double planted our trees in order to yield more per acre. And we've learned, so when I was a child, my grandfather, I always wondered how he made a living because he never went to work. But he had 10 acres of citrus, and that's what he made money off of. And he made money off of that because then you just had to water, you topped out your tree, maybe trees once a year, and it was gravy coming in. Now it's different. Now we've learned how we have to utilize certain pesticides or herbicides and fertilizers, and we have to constantly fertilize the trees. We have to manage our watering. So it's a lot more labor intensive, and so the yield is not as much. But we have learned how to, just like all agriculture producers do, we don't depend on other people. We've learned how to try to work within those parameters, although we have very much been supportive of greening research in order to find some kind of citrus fruit stock that will be resistant to the Asian psyllid. But for the first time this past year, we actually had a decent looking crop on our early varieties of oranges, and so did everyone around me, had a really nice looking crop. And then along came Hurricane Irma and put it all on the ground. Now our later varieties of Valencias that we just picked, they weren't damaged as much. But what we don't know is what happens next year, because for the first time in my lifetime, I actually saw trees standing in water, which I've never seen before. We don't know how that water is going to impact the stress on the tree. We won't know that until we see what our yield is next year. So for the commissioner, it's important that the commissioner get out of the office and out into the field and see what people are doing, looking at the different things that different citrus growers are doing, because everyone's doing something different, and seeing what is yielding the best results, and then going back to the legislature and talking about those things and advocating for funding in specific areas and working with the University of Florida and IFAS to continue to work on a cure for greening.
There's a natural tension in Florida, it seems, Senator, between development of homes, subdivisions, and agriculture. You know, when we have difficult times in the agriculture business, that land becomes ripe, if you will, for real estate development. How do we preserve agriculture in Florida? We're welcoming 400,000 new people to Florida every year. There is tension, especially in Central Florida, which was the heart of the citrus, a lot of the heart of the citrus industry. How do we resist that natural economic urge to develop all of this land and keep some of that land to maintain this important part of our economy and our culture?
Well, I think agriculture producers are feeling the pressure on 2 sides. They're feeling it from development. They're also feeling it from the government that continues to buy land. And I will say, while the Florida Forever program, when it was implemented in its inception, was good, and we purchased a lot of land, we in many cases have purchased too much land to the point that we can't manage that land. There is another program within the Department of Agriculture called Rural and Family Lands, which I'm a big proponent of. And this past session, we didn't fund it. For the last 2 sessions, we have not funded it as we should. Historically, we funded around $35 million. Last 2 sessions ago, we funded it at 10. This past session, we funded it at 5. So we will run out of money before we get to all the projects. Well, what that program does is it allows the producer to sell the development rights of the property to make sure it always stays in agriculture production. And that keeps it on the tax roll, so it keeps the money going into the county. I represent the middle part of the state, so I go from Polk, Hardy, DeSoto, Charlotte, Lee, Glades, Okeechobee, and Highlands.
The heartland.
The heartland. And Glades County specifically has really fallen victim to the land purchasing by the government. Water management has purchased so many parcels of the county suffering for their income. So they have to come to the legislature many times to try to help with their water projects and things they could have done had they not lost all of that land. And many pieces of that land is not being maintained. And so I think the state has to really take a hard look at what we purchased. What do we do with it going forward? Because if we can't take care of it, I don't know why we have it. And those are just, as part of, the agriculture commissioner is part of the cabinet, so the commissioner will have some input on those types of things.
Should some of that land be leased back to farmers?
They should. When we have in some cases where we allow hunting and fishing on those lands, but it's not the majority of the lands. Many of them are sitting there not being able to be used.
One of the ways to protect agriculture in Florida is to diversify it, and we've had some good new crops in recent years, recent decades: blueberries, peaches. I even read some stories about olives being grown in Florida. Talk about that. Talk about the future of agriculture in Florida. We do so much more than citrus, but what can we do to make it more resilient? You mentioned diversification in your own family farm.
Yeah, many of the citrus growers particularly have gone into blueberries, they've planted peaches, they've done olives, they've done something in addition to citrus just to have some diversification, which is important no matter whether you're in citrus, whether you're doing peanuts or something up in North Florida. I think it's important to be diversified because agriculture, as you know, is dependent on Mother Nature, and sometimes we get a blow from that aspect. But I think you look at things like precision agriculture, and I'm going to go roll into economic development with this. Let's talk about the digital divide that we see in our rural areas. So I just read an article that in America, 29% of farms don't have access to the internet. So that prevents me from getting on my laptop and actually utilizing a program that specifically tells me how much fertilizer to drop, how much water to drop. And we want to do that because we want to preserve the natural resources as much as possible, and we don't want to utilize any more fertilizer than we have to because it's money to the bottom line unless it's something else that goes into the environment. And if you don't have connectivity, then you can't do that. So what I'm proposing within one of my plans is to move the Rural Economic Development Initiative from the Department of Economic Opportunity into the Florida Department of Agriculture, because who knows rural Florida better than the Agriculture Commissioner? And I think the Commissioner should be the chief rural advocate in Florida, and I'd like to see one person specifically, maybe a deputy within the department, totally focus on rural improvement, because there are so many things that you can do to revitalize your main streets in Moorhaven or in Wauchula or Zolfo Springs where I live, that you can't do it without connectivity. You have to have connectivity and you have to have infrastructure.
That's a great point. Commissioner Putnam really focused on water and elevated that issue, I think, for all Floridians. That issue is not going to go away and will be a huge challenge in Florida as we see more and more people move here, plus the sea level rise issues in southeast Florida, potentially all of Florida. So tell us what your views are on water policy and what you'll do to advance those issues when you're commissioner.
Well, as you know, there's an Office of Ag Water Policy within the department, and a few years ago I did a piece of legislation that says agriculture needs to be at the table for every major water policy decision made, because there has to be a balance between the water use from urban areas to rural areas. But what I'm proposing to do is to co-locate these employees with water management districts, and in some cases DEP, in order that everyone is talking together, because you don't When you have different agencies working in silos and they're not collaborating, you oftentimes find gridlock and you just don't move the ball forward, and I'd like to see them co-located. I think specifically, we've addressed it in the legislature, and that's dealing with what happens north of Lake Okeechobee, where we've seen a lot of development, so I represent Okeechobee County, and I will tell you, the citizens of my district, they want Lake Okeechobee to be clean, because it's a tourist attraction. And so we've done over the years some water projects north of Lake Okeechobee to start to clean up that water, and we're still doing it, we will continue to do it. But the southern storage also has it does have a component within this while we're trying to clean up that northern portion, because we don't want to see happen what's been happening where they're releasing fresh water out into the estuaries and it's mixing with salt water and the fish are dying. We want to stop that, and I think we've done a lot to elevate that. We continue to work on Everglades restoration. It's going well. We're making progress. The farmers out in the Everglades agriculture area they're true conservationists, and best management practices we've implemented in the Department of Agriculture will continue to implement those best management practices based on science and not based on whatever is misinformation is out on Facebook today, which we see a lot. We see a lot of misinformation. And that's the other thing I think is incumbent upon the commissioners, to be out among the public, get out of the office, get out in the field, go out into the Rotaries and the Kiwanis clubs and the homeowners associations, and talk about what the department's doing, what we're doing with water, how we're preserving our natural resources. Because I'll tell you, you're all busy. You're running to work every day, you're doing things. You may stop for one of your civic clubs or a church group, and you're not looking at Facebook every day. You don't get up every day and say, oh, I'm going to go look at the Department of Agriculture's website to see what they're doing on water today. You're just not.
That's how I started.
So I just think that it's important for the commissioner to be out talking with people.
There's another big aspect of your job as the commissioner, and that's consumer protection, right? It's a part of the title of the job. So talk to us about the role of the commissioner on consumer protection issues and how you envision that part of your administration.
Well, that's probably one of the most fun parts of the job. I think it is the chief consumer advocate for the state of Florida. So my background, and you talked a little bit about it, it's been in healthcare. I nursed for 17 years, and then I left my job and ran my dad's business. We had a company called Grimsley Oil Company. We had 10 convenience stores, totally focused on customer service. And then now I'm back into healthcare after we sold our company, and I ran for office, and I'm a hospital administrator, totally focused on customer satisfaction. It's the same thing, same job, same purpose, dealing with consumers, making sure that their needs are met, educating them again, letting them know what's fresh out there today from Florida that you can go buy. It's blueberry season. But again, besides George, no one got up and checked the website this morning to see what the fresh fruit of the day is. And that's how you educate people. But let's talk about things like skimmers on the gas pump. You probably interact with the department, I bet 10 times a day when you don't know it, and you don't know it because it's working. When I dealt with it 25 years ago as a business owner, it wasn't working that well. But if you pull up to the local gas station and you pump a half a gallon of gas instead of a gallon, you're going to know it. And that's going to fall back on the commissioner. I always give a story about one of the inspectors in the Department of Agriculture, this is 25 years ago, came into my store when in Florida you have to have hot water to sell food, and we were our hot water heater was out. We were right in the middle of replacing it, but he didn't want to wait. I had about 20 more minutes on the job. He said, well, I'm going to red tag your equipment, shut you down for the weekend. I'll come back Monday to turn you on. That stuff we don't need to happen. I mean, he couldn't cut me a slack of just 20 minutes to get back up in my operation. But you also have to balance that out because you don't want, you want to make sure that hot water's there because you want the consumer to be protected. But you also need to have a little flexibility with the business owner and just give them 20 minutes. I mean, how much was that to ask for? But it is the chief consumer advocate, and I'm excited about that. It's pawn shops, it's the people that come and repossess your car if you don't pay your bill, it's security guards, it's pest control, it's amusement park rides. There's a wide variety of things. It is about keeping consumers safe, but it's about doing it in a business-friendly manner.
So let me ask you a fun question before I turn it over to you. We have
Can I talk about my grandkids?
That will. we've got great oysters in Florida. And aquaculture and that whole environment is really interesting and important. So one of the things that Florida has been dealing with is water flow into Apalachicola and litigation with other states. But tell us about that whole industry, because a lot of folks here probably are not from the Panhandle and don't know what a neat thing that is for the state of Florida.
Well, they suffered a lot because of the lack of water flowing into Apalachicola Bay, and there's a lot of different opinions out there. I just recently had a conversation with one of the commissioners up there, but I believe that is something that's very, depending on what happens with all the legal outcomes, that's going to be something that the commissioner, and Commissioner Butler's done it, but going to have to continue to be at the table and fighting for that industry. And this is an extremely important industry in the state of Florida, not to mention that it's really good food.
Yes.
But it'll be one of the top things on the priority list.
Let me open up to questions for Senator Grimsley. Principal.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry, we're glad you're participating.
I have a lot of questions to ask, well, a few questions to ask you. One of your things is, yes, you're absolutely right. I'm being a principal and being an advocate for education and being out there and being on many boards. I will not look at an agricultural website. Is there in your thoughts to put something out like a vector for people who can sign up? Because sometimes it is overwhelming if I do go or any other person want to know about water, your general constituents, something that's inviting and must, just get to the point. Because sometimes with these new websites and everything, it's overwhelming for a lot of your constituents. So educating about water, that would be, just a little, something easier for us too, so we can read. My question really is about schools in food choices
So
and
before you
food.
move on to your question,
Okay.
can I just address that real
Okay,
quick?
please.
So I think that the commissioner ought to be out in the schools. And I think that different counties do different things, and it is county specific because all 67 counties are different. But our county specifically, we do something called Ag Venture, which is a not-for-profit, but the local Farm Bureau and everyone helps with it, and that educates our children on what is fresh today and where does milk come from? How does it get to Publix? It's a really good program, but there's also programs out that can. Are you in elementary school? Or?
No, I'm in Palm Beach County. I'm elementary and middle school.
So it's both. Okay, so the high school has programs like Future Farmers of America, and so do some middle schools and 4-H, and we can utilize some of those groups as projects to go out into the elementary schools and talk about different things like that. I think that's so important.
It is important. So you're touching on a subject that I was going to ask a few questions about agriculture, then something that's got to deal with grants or money that's out there. If you're chosen to be the agricultural person to be in charge of this, will you make sure that there's money going towards the education, so not just teachers getting these resources, but enlightening them in the classroom, especially in elementary and middle school, how you can go back and make, instead of going to McDonald's or Burger King, you can farm your own vegetables in the classrooms or in the gardens and eat that. We don't see a lot of that in the public schools, especially in Palm Beach. We try to do as much, but when I go to other counties, I don't see that. So I don't see enough resources for that, and hopefully, if you become the agricultural person in charge, will you make sure there's money coming towards that?
Yeah, we see some, I've seen it a few places, but you're right, not very many places. I was in one city the other day where they have a community garden that the 4-H actually is doing it as a project. Now, they raise money locally to do it, but it's in an area where it's, I would call it a food desert, where there's not any grocery stores. And so it was a Saturday morning, and it was nice to see the community going to pick those fresh fruits and vegetables that these kids have grown. So it's done a couple things. It's fed the community that don't have transportation to get out to where there's fresh fruits and vegetables, but it's also taught these kids responsibility, and it's taught them about giving back. Now, we fund 4-H in the legislature. In 2006, I was part of the appropriations process where we put in $1 million for 4-H, and we hear about, we talk about transparency and everything within the budget process. We were worried about it getting vetoed that year, so we kind of hid it in a line item. But a couple of years ago, it was rolled back out publicly. And when that happened, the governor's office thought it was new money and went in and vetoed it. Now they understand. They understand exactly what it was for and what it was being utilized for. But even this year, we weren't able to get it back. We got $500,000 back. But as a commissioner, I am determined to keep that program funded, and it doesn't fall under Department of Agriculture, but I think it feeds into it. So I think it's extremely important that the commissioner be that loud voice and that advocate for that, because it does so many different things.
Okay, my last question is about the USDA guidelines about schools when they're serving students, especially elementary and middle school. What I notice in many schools that I have seen, and especially my school and other Title I schools, that the proportion that they give students is not enough. Kids eat. There are a lot of kids in middle school, they eat everything, and they like to get second servings. And apparently in Title I schools, you can't. This is the portion that you get, and that's it. How can this change? If you become the agricultural person, how can this change? Because not enough people go in to see, like people like as me being a principal, I'm always looking and seeing if the kids are full, if that's enough, but they're always hungry. It's always proportional, or it's too much salt, or too much sugar. And we have a big obesity in our state, Florida. How can these change?
Well, I see it too. My daughter's a fourth grade school teacher. So I see what's happening. Those USDA guidelines tie the hands of the states. Because we, as you know, we have a farm to school program here that takes fresh fruits and vegetables to the school district. It's given another market for producers. It's giving a better buying price in most cases to school districts. But I think the one thing that no one talks about that the commissioner ought to be talking about is what happens to the obesity epidemic 10 years down the road. The obesity issue that we're seeing with our kids that then ties into diabetes and all these other things that impact business owners as these kids get older. But the other thing is that this program will help, and that's the nutritional content that these kids are getting. And I'm not talking about kids like your kids who eat a good meal at home in the morning and eat a good meal in the evening. It doesn't really matter what they eat at lunch. There are so many kids that are coming to school, they're eating potato chips 5 days a week for breakfast. That's what they get. And they're not learning because they don't have the nutritional value in order to absorb. And so you say, well, why do I care about that if I don't have kids? Well, you care about that because that's your next generation of lawyers, your doctors, your auto mechanics, and they'll either grow up to be taxpayers and be productive members of society, or they're going to grow up to be takers of the system. So to answer your question specifically, we have to drill down into that program and make sure that it is being fully utilized in all 67 school districts. The funding has to be there, but the commissioner, it'll be his or her job to go to Tallahassee or to go to Washington and work on those USDA guidelines because they are a problem by tying our hands. And you're right. Boys specifically, they're growing. They want 2 helpings of squash. And somebody said to me the other day, well, the kids want to eat their vegetables anyway, in fact, camouflage them. I'm like, not in my district. These kids that come to school from Glaze County, they're hungry. They're going to eat those vegetables. They want 2 helpings of them, and we need to give them to them. Thank you.
Ms. Grimsley, good morning. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your comments about 4-H, and also FFA is another critical program in my mind. Both those programs I had the benefit of being a part of, and it really helps you build leadership and skill sets that are sorely lacking from a source standpoint today. You obviously can go very wide and you can go very deep on the issues. I'd like to hear interesting background, family business, nurse, hospital administrator, role in the legislature. Go back and tell me your evolution, your 2 or 3 core values. What caused you to be where you're at today, and why do you feel like you're the best candidate for a commissioner position?
Well, I'm 5 generations in Florida, born and raised in the heartland. It's a place where I learned my value system. It's a place where we still love our Bible. We really love our guns. We respect each other. We treat each other with respect. We love our land. We take care of it. It's a place where we will always stand for our flag. We're just not gonna, that's just who we are. That's the value system that I was taught growing up. But I never set out to get involved in politics. 25 years ago, I didn't want anything to do with it. I really didn't talk to people very much. I was working in an OR, and that's all I saw all day was the 4 walls of the OR. And then my dad got sick, and when he did, I had to leave my job to run his company because I'm an only child. My mom needed to be with him. I went back to school. I got a business degree, undergrad, then I got an MBA. And then I started running, I was running the company and trying to make the payroll and doing what everybody else does who has a business, and realized how government impacted our day-to-day life. And I told you the coffee story. That really, really irritated me. when that guy did that. And I got on the phone that afternoon and I called Tallahassee to try to find that guy's boss. And the person I got in the Department of Agriculture, he was like, ma'am, I don't really care what you tell me. You're not going to sell any coffee this weekend, and that's just the way it is. I'm like, you know what? It shouldn't be that way. I pay taxes. I should be treated with respect. I think that as consumers, whether you're a farmer or a rancher or you're not, you expect to be treated with respect. You want that process to be easy for you. You don't want to spend 10 minutes on the website when you check it in the morning. And if it is difficult, you want someone in that department, there are 3,800 employees, to hold your hand and help you get through it. I didn't find that in Tallahassee when I went at the time. I went into a legislator's office one day, and the whole time I'm talking to him, he's working on his computer with his back to me. And I'm like, you know what, I drove 6 hours, I pay taxes. You can at least give me the respect of at least pretending that you're listening to me, whether you are or not. And I walked out with our executive director one day, and I said to him about one of the members, I said, listen, if they can get elected, I think I can do this. And I can do it a whole lot better, because I used to think they were a lot smarter than me. Listen, we're not that smart. I found that out pretty quick. And if you don't have the want to listen and to learn as an elected official, it's just like being a nurse. You're not going to be any different. And so that was kind of my foray into politics. And I just decided one day, we sold our company, I'm going to run. I have no idea if I can win. I've never learned to be that politician who answers a question and never really answers it. I try to answer it directly, and it still bothers me. Some people that I serve with and I listen to them and how they address the public, it bothers me because they never really give a straight answer. If I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know, and I'll go try to figure it out. But that's how I got there, and I was really ready to go home. I've been in the legislature 14 years, and I worry about people calling me a professional politician. But I mean, I've got a whole other life. I've got 2 grandkids, 3 horses I'd like to ride. I've got a hospital to run. I just built a new one, just moved into it before Christmas. I don't really need to be in public office, but this position is extremely important to me. And so many people have said, why don't you get out and run for Congress? I'm like, I don't want to run for Congress. This matters to me. This is what directly impacts the community that I live in, and I'll either run for agriculture commissioner or I'll go home. But I am excited about what we can do with it. I think by getting out of the political box and dealing with the issues and working with people, being out in the public, I just think all of us together, we can do a lot of great things.
Question here on the right.
Hey, Senator. Thank you for being here today. Christian Miner with the Florida Juvenile Justice Association. I want to touch upon another facet of your job, to be agricultural commissioner, sitting on the clemency board. Recently, there's a ruling by U.S. District Judge Mark Walker that the current clemency process in place is unconstitutional. We've got a little over 20,000 people that are backlogged in the clemency system, hearing around 4 people a year. These are people that can be productive tax-paying citizens, but many of which are low-level drug offenders that are yet to have their rights restored. Kind of want to get your take on a solution to that. Where do you stand on that? It's very critical as it pertains to jobs as well.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with this cabinet and how they address it in the coming days. But I do think that there is a method for some rights restoration for the nonviolent offenders. But I think a big important part of that is addressing the backlog and how we get that backlog moved through quickly. But also an important part of it is address the job aspects and how do we reintegrate them into society. And there are a lot of good programs out there, but we've got to make sure that we get that piece in there. But at the same time, I also think you never want to exclude the victims and their ability to testify as well.
Hi, thank you. My question, and perhaps you don't get this very often, and I'm not even sure this is under your domain, but the Everglades and the snake problem down there. I'm just curious if this is viewed as a serious problem, which it appears to be, and if there's actually serious remedies, or if this is going to be a lost cause.
It's not under the domain of the Department of Agriculture, it's under Fish and Wildlife, but it is a serious problem, and I think it's something that government as a whole is going to have to look at about bringing these types of species into the state, into the U.S., and then people, they buy them and they like them, and then they let them loose, and then that's what happens. But the department specifically doesn't have any regulatory aspect over it, but Fish and Wildlife does, but I think it's something that's got to be addressed. It is becoming a big problem. Now, I know they're having they're opening up seasons where you can go out and hunt pythons. They're probably going to have to step that up some.
Dan Peterson with the James Madison Institute. Thank you for being here, Senator. You said two things that caught my attention. Number one is there's never enough money to maintain the government lands that are already owned by government, if I understood you correctly. Second, there's not enough money in the funding to really fund the rural lands program. Is that correct? I was wondering if you would comment then on the use of Amendment 1 money. It would seem to me that with that continuous revenue stream that we have guaranteed for the next 20 years, that that would be a source of income that could really help fund those programs. And I know the big push is always buy, but the more land you own, that maintenance problem just continues to get bigger and bigger. So the use of Amendment 1 funding.
Well, and the reason there's not enough money is because, like this year, for example, all the money went into Florida Forever. I'd be a proponent of rolling that back totally and moving the majority of that money into the Rural and Family Lands Program, and then we would have enough. I'll go back to saying what I said before. If you don't have the ability, the financial ability to maintain the land, then why do you purchase it? Because it deteriorates. So you could use Amendment 1 money for it, but right now I don't think you need to. I think you just need to appropriate the money where it should go. That's the issue that we face, but certainly you could use Amendment 1 money for it. Historically we've used it, and the intention I think was for water projects and infrastructure and that type of thing. But if you really had to down the road, you could, but right now I don't think you need to. I think you just need to appropriate the money where it really needs to go.
Senator Grimsley, Belinda Kaiser, it's wonderful to have you with us today. I actually have two questions, and the first one has to do with water quality and quantity, and I'm sure you addressed it, but I had to leave for just a moment. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us again your top 3 or 4 priorities as it relates to water quality and quantity. And then the second question I have, and I'm not sure that this really falls under the jurisdiction of the Commissioner of Agriculture, but as an educator, one of the things I continue to have an interest in is seeing that our rural areas in Florida continue to have an opportunity to upgrade certain skills, that they have the ability, if they have an interest, in terms of perhaps looking at some of the different fields that are growing from an education perspective, whether it be healthcare or others. And I think back to the fact that I grew up in Leon County, and so there's so much talent in those areas, and so just some of your thoughts, if you don't mind sharing.
Okay. Yeah, I think you stepped out. We did talk about it earlier, but as far as water, we talked about the whole flow from northern Everglades down into the Everglades agriculture area, and how we've tried to clean up the water above Lake Okeechobee, because Lake Okeechobee, for those that live in Okeechobee County and Glades County, that is a tourist destination for them. So we want that water to be clean. We want it to be clean when it gets there. If we can do that, then we deal with the issues where it's going out into the estuaries and creating more problems for both coasts. So with the projects that we've done, and now the southern storage that we have passed and set up Bill 10, that gives us a better opportunity to deal with those issues specifically. And I also talked about the rural areas. What I'm proposing for rural areas is that you take the Rural Economic Development Initiative and move it from DO to Department of Agriculture. Because I think that the Agriculture Commissioner should be the chief rural advocate for the state of Florida. And I'd like to see a deputy specifically overseeing that, totally focusing on that. We know 29% of the farms in the U.S. don't have access to the internet. If you don't have access to the internet, you can never grow your Main Street. If you have it, if you've got the infrastructure there, you can put all kinds of businesses in rural Florida. But if you don't have access to the internet, I can't go out on my tractor and control my fertilizer dispersion and also my water without having connectivity. And that's what we're really struggling with. But I do think there's some it's called the Rural Economic Development, maybe give us the name wrong, job grant, but it's at $5 million we funded. I'd like to see it at 10 in order to use in those rural areas. And I'll give you an example. In Glades County, the legislature funded a few years ago a facility that is called the Glaze Training Center, and that was all part of Senate Bill 10. It was up and running by the time we passed Senate Bill 10, but I said to them, like, hey, we've got to have some rural economic development out here. Now we've attracted a truck driving school, but we also need to attract specifically whatever it is that Okeechobee County needs, whatever it is that Glaze County needs, Hardy, Highlands, because you have to be specific to the community if you want to actually have rural economic development. That doesn't change it, it doesn't make it a Miami, but it makes it prosperous enough that we can get a grocery store in Moorhaven. Thank you.
Sir Grimsley, thank you very much. Best of luck to you. Give her a round of applause, please.